You ever get to the end of a day and you look back over it and you think, dang, today was the day I was supposed to get started. Today was the day I was supposed to do the thing, that I was going to start traveling down this road, but then you didn't for whatever reason. How do you do it? How do you just stop wasting time and begin? Let's talk about it. In the early 1940s, there was a young man named Greg who had gotten into Morse code. It was really just a hobby. It was a way for him and his grandfather to connect, and he would send his grandfather Morse code messages, and they would just kind of have fun going back and forth. But it was just, for enjoyment's sake. It had nothing to do with a job or a profession or anything like that. Greg never thought he was going to monetize Morse code, but then World War II broke out, and one day Greg saw an ad in his local newspaper for the military, and they were needing people who knew how to send messages and receive messages and translate Morse code. And so Greg's like, okay, well, I'm pretty good at this, and maybe this is a way for me to help with the war effort and make a little extra money for my family. And so the next day, Greg got up and he went down to the office building where the military was doing interviews for people to, get these Morse code jobs. But unfortunately, Greg woke up a good bit later than he meant to, and a million things kept getting in the way, so it took a lot longer to get out of the house than he was hoping. But anyway, he left and he went down to the office building where they were doing the interviews. And to be honest, a lot of people, when things get in the way, when there's obstacles, they're just like, yeah, whatever, I'll do it tomorrow. Maybe I won't do it at all, but they stop right there. And so, Greg just leaving his house and getting down to the office at all would already put him in like the top, 10%. And so I think there's something to think about. It's like, if you can just overcome any obstacles that keep getting in your way and just show up, that's a huge thing. And so anyway, Greg gets down to the office building and he goes into the waiting room and he realizes, oh no, this place is packed. There's so many other people in this room applying for this job. This one job, is there only one job available? There's all these people. This is not good. And he was not expecting to have this much competition. And he knows the guy that was there standing next to the door, and he said, how long have y'all been here? And the guy was like, well, I've been here an hour, but there's a lot of people been here a lot longer than that. You're here long before me, and at this point, it's just standing room only. And it's another time where a lot of people, they just turn around and go somewhere else. They weren't one of the first ones. They weren't one of the early adopters. They weren't one of the folks that got there earlier first. And so it's like, it's too crowded, too much competition, too much other stuff going on. I'll go do something else. Maybe tomorrow, maybe one day, and they don't stick it out. But Greg did. He stuck it out. He stayed there and he's looking around, kind of scoping out the competition, and he's listening to little side conversations and trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be my advantage and how am I going to impress these folks that are doing the interviews? And he asked the guy, he's like, well, has anybody gone back there? Are they doing the interviews yet? And they're like, no, they haven't even started. Nobody's gone back there as far as I know. I was like, oh, okay. And Greg, he's just listening, and he notices there's Morse code messages and messages coming in and going out, and he's not entirely sure, like, is this military stuff, whatever, but he just kind of keeps listening and just waiting his turn. And after a few minutes, he listens a little more, and he kind of moves off of the wall, and he takes a few steps forward and a few more forward, and then he just walks through the door that everybody was waiting to go into. He just walks on in, and everybody's looking around like, can you do that? Can he do that? And he's gone for a little bit, and I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later, Greg walks back out, and he's with a colonel. And the colonel looks at everybody else in the room and said, sorry guys, everybody else, y'all can go home. Greg here, he's got the job. See, what Greg realized is that the Morse code message that was in the background wasn't just some random thing. It wasn't military code or anything like that. It was saying, if you understand this, come through the door. And so all the guys that had been there for hours, either they weren't listening, or they weren't paying attention, or maybe they just didn't know how to decipher the message, but Greg did. And as soon as it clicked, he went in and he got the job. And there were probably other people in the room that thought that was the message, that they're hearing it, they're listening, they probably know Morse code just like Greg if they're applying for that job, but they never went through the door. They doubted themselves. They were unsure. And so it didn't work out for them. It's not just about showing up. You also have to do the thing. And doubt kills far more dreams than failure ever will. And so it's just some things to think about. Like, where are you in your journey? Are you just scrolling through social media, thinking, oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could be a writer, a filmmaker, a designer, a creator of some kind, but you never get off the couch. You never get into motion. So here are 3 things to think about if you're having a hard time getting started. And the first one is lower the bar. A lot of times we set the bar at amazing, and then that makes it really hard to begin because it's already impossible. It's like, well, why am I even going to try if I can't be awesome at this thing? And when you're starting out with anything, you're not going to be any good. It's amazing, it's awesome when you can just be naturally really good at something, but it's pretty rare, and you are probably not an outlier. I know I'm not an outlier, and so, when you set the bar too high from the get-go, it's a lot easier to just sit on the couch. And something, especially with creative work, is to realize you develop taste long before you develop skill. And what that means is you'll know something is good long before you can make anything that's good. And a lot of times people give up because the idea that they have in their head, it's impossible for their reality to live up to it. And it just takes time, it takes quantity, it takes doing things over and over again. There's just no substitute for reps. You just have to put the work in, put the reps in, and get better over time. And so you want to lower the bar. You want to put the bar so low. I mean, just as low. You want to put the bar on the floor. Just set the bar on the floor. If you put it under the floor, put it under the floor, and then you just walk over it. That's what you want to do. You want to break things up into smaller chunks, smaller bites, so small that you can't help but do them. And then what happens is you get momentum. Objects in motion stay in motion. Objects at rest stay at rest. And so if you are currently at rest, and whatever that means for you, like you might be literally just on the couch at rest, you got to get into motion and you got to pick up some momentum. And then the rock starts rolling downhill, and then you're off to the races. But you got to get a quick win. You got to do something easy to just get going. Follow various authors and writers online, and I saw one of them one time. Someone had a fan of their work had asked him, it's like, well, how do you write every single day? Like, what's your process? Do you have do you try to write 10 pages a day, or like what does it look like? And this author, she said, I just try to write 25 words. And you're like, 25 words is like, that's like a sentence and a half. Like that's nothing. That's literally nothing in the grand scheme if you're writing, a 500-page book or something like that. 25 words. It's like, are you serious? And like, yeah, that's my goal. It's as easy and as low maintenance as it can possibly be. But here's the cool thing: if I can just get 25 words in, a lot of times I can get 50 and 100 and 1,000, sometimes 2,000 words in a day. I just have to get started. And if my goal is 2,000 words from the get-go, and I don't feel good, I'm not, not in the mood, there's no motivation, no inspiration, I'm just kind of meh that day, and if my goal is 2,000, it's really easy to go, I'll do it tomorrow. But if it's just 25, like if it's just 2 sentences, if it's just a, quick paragraph, I can do that. Anybody could do that. And then she gets rolling, and then she gets some momentum, and then she's off the races. Donald Miller tells a story about his exercise regime, and he's trying to lose weight and trying to get into shape, and he had so many issues of just going up and down in his weight, and he'd have a goal, and he'd reach the goal, and then he'd gain all the weight back, or whatever it was. And so he had to do something different, and so he created this system where he was going to start swimming every day, and his goal was just to get into the pool. Just get into the swimming pool. If he gets in the pool, then that is a good day. You can check it off the to-do list, then he's accomplished what he set out to that day. Because what he realized is that, well, if he's in the pool, you can do a lap. You did a lap, you can do a couple laps, you can do 10 laps, and then you do 30 minutes, an hour of swimming, and then over time you get into pretty good shape. But it started off with just as low a bar as you could possibly have with swimming. Is just get in. Just get into the pool. And so what does that look like for you? How can you lower the bar just as low as possible and then start stepping over it? If you start off and the bar is 10 feet and you can't jump more than a foot, why begin? And that's where most people are, and they never get moving. They never start. And you can't do anything if you don't begin. So first thing, lower the bar. The second thing, define success on your own terms. So often we have a hard time doing things, have a hard time getting going, getting started, because we're allowing other people to define what success is for us. Or we just look at the world. We look at life in general and what the world calls success. And so we allow that to hamper us. We allow that to push us down and keep us from going anywhere. And, I come out of the nonprofit world, the church world, the ministry world, and so often the goals there are ABC: attendance, buildings, cash. And it's a weird thing to think about if you're, I worked with homeless services and trying to help people get out of homelessness and get into housing and things like that. And it's like, well, what are we measuring? You know, is it just about how many people showed up to lunch? You know, we fed 100 people at lunch. Is that what a win looks like? I mean, we can make a bunch of bologna sandwiches and go out on the street and just start throwing them at people and be like, hey, we fed 200 people. I mean, but is that really what we're trying to accomplish? You know, if we're just trying to get people in the door, I mean, we can give away iPads or, you know, something like that, and all of a sudden we can fill up a room. But is that really what success looked like for what we were trying to accomplish? You know, and in the business world, so often it's all about numbers, it's all about growth and profit and stock prices and things like that. But it's like, is that really what success is? You know, and maybe for some companies it is, but I feel like, especially in creative work, it's got to be deeper than that. It's got to be more valuable, something that actually means something that matters. And you kind of have to define it for you. Like, what is a win for you? What does the scoreboard look like for you? It's probably not actually the number of followers that you have. It's probably not the number of downloads or the number of likes or you know, whatever the number system, you know, on the platform you prefer. That's probably not it. And so how do you define success? A lot of people never define what winning is to them, and then they wonder why they feel like they're always losing. It's like, well, you have to know the game. You have to understand how to score. And so if you haven't defined that, what does that look like? And then use that as motivation. Use that as a way to kind of propel yourself forward. Create some milestones, some things that you're aiming at, some things that you're trying to accomplish. Again, keep the bar low. Don't overdo it. And I want to make $1 zillion. Okay, but is it really about the money? Is it really about followers and likes and comments and all that kind of thing? Or is it something deeper? Are you really trying to accomplish something? And typically you want to do it for you or for the people that are really close to you, or, you know, do it for something bigger than yourself. But be careful of listening to other people and what they define success as, or, you know, seeing things online, stuff that's not even real. You know, a lot of stuff we see on the internet, it's staged, it's made up. And so then you start comparing your behind the scenes to other people's highlights, and the highlights are only here. You know, you're not even seeing all the other stuff around it. So just be careful of that, because it's very discouraging a lot of times. And you're seeing these things, you're like, oh, I want that, I wish I could do it, but I don't have this or that or the other. And it's like, well, that person doesn't either. It's all a sham. What does success look like for you? Define that, write it down. Change it over time. You know, it's going to change as life changes, as things go up and down. But what does a win look like? Again, it's hard to know if you're winning when you don't even know what a win looks like. Number 3, put the process above the result. A lot of times people will say, I want to be a writer, I want to be an author. And what they really mean is, I want to be rich and famous and people to read things that I write. But what they really want, though, is the result of writing, of good writing. And they don't actually enjoy the overall process. And I know the old cliche is writers don't like to write, they like to have written. And there's a lot of truth in that. But at the same time, the process has to be enjoyable, at least to a certain degree, for you. Otherwise, you're going to get burnt out. Otherwise, you're not going to last, right? You might find a way to show up. You might find a way to get started, but you're not going to stay that way. You're going to lose your momentum because you just don't like it. And I've done so many different things in creative work, and like, oh, I try this, and I try that over there, and it just didn't keep me going. It didn't keep my interest, because what I really wanted was the results, and then I didn't actually enjoy the process. And so how can you create some systems in your life that build that process, that support that process, and then you get really, really good at the process, whether it's writing every day or filming videos or designing different things, creating different things. Like, what does it look like to put that process above the result that you're trying to accomplish? Because a lot of times we get discouraged because we're not seeing the result. We're not rich and famous. We're not seeing the followers and the comments and the likes and the hearts and all that kind of stuff. But that's not even really the thing. And it's nice to get some encouraging words. It's nice to see people interacting with what you're doing, what you're creating, what you're working on, and for them to get value out of it. But it's like, but is that the thing? Is that really why we do it? Do we create just so other people can enjoy it? Or is there something internal as well? And what I find personally is the things that I am able to stick with, the things I'm able to do for long term, are the things that I enjoy doing. And it's nice when other people enjoy it too, but even if they don't, I enjoy it. The things I've made the most money off of, the things that have built my business the most, have been the things that I got the most enjoyment out of. And if I start trying to chase trends and chase what's the next, latest and greatest, what's hot and all that kind of thing, yeah, there's some value in that sometimes, and you can build things but it's not sustainable, right? And so if you're having a hard time getting going and staying going, maybe that's the issue. It's because you haven't built the system. You haven't built the process. You've got all these big goals and maybe they're overwhelming. Just let go of the goals. Build the process. Build the system that makes success inevitable, right? Stop putting success, whatever you define that as the goal. Build the system that makes success inevitable. Like, it's gonna happen. There's no other way. And then just work the system. And it gets easier as you go. And it's a lot easier to get out of bed every morning. It's a lot easier to get off the couch and stop scrolling through social media because you've built a system. You have a process. And that is a wonderful way to just keep going. And even when life is hard and things don't go your way and you fail and you make mistakes and things just don't turn out, you've got that muscle memory, you've got that process, that system in place, and you just keep going. You just find a way to keep going. So many people, especially creative people, they run to one thing, and they run to another, and they run to this other thing. And that's been me for my entire creative career. It's just like one thing after another. But it wasn't until I really just stopped and I started building a process and making it consistent. That's when I started seeing real results. That's when I really started to enjoy what I was doing, when I wasn't running from one thing to the next every 5 minutes. And so if you're having a hard time getting started, maybe you've started too many other things. You've got too many shiny objects running around. And so you just need to take a step back. Again, lower the bar, define success, but then just focus on one thing or one or two things, and then just see what happens and give it some time. A lot of times we want to microwave things that need to be in the crock pot. We want to do the quick 30-second thing when this is something that's going to need to cook all day. And those things are usually better. They last longer. They're more fulfilling long term. And so if that's your issue, if you get that shiny object syndrome, take a step back, write some stuff down. Write down 10 things you want to accomplish and then cross off 8 of them. What are the top 2 out of that 10? And then just focus on those for a while. And don't worry about anything else. Just jump right into it. Back in 2016, I was having a bit of a weird year. And 2016 was a weird year in general, especially in the United States, but I was having a very interesting year. I just come out of a job where I was working 3 weeks on, 1 day off. I was living in Honduras at the time, and I had finally gotten some free time where I was working, but I also finally had some days and hours to myself. And I started thinking through, okay, what do I want to do now that I have this extra time, this extra free time? And I had been designing board games, and I've been writing books, and I've been, creating various types of content. I had a lot of stuff going on, but it's like, okay, what do I want to do? And so I wrote a book, and it sold, I don't know, a few hundred copies. I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. I guess that was a lot of work just for that. What if I start a YouTube channel? So 2016, I started a YouTube channel, and I got a handful of views here and there, and I did, I don't know, maybe 10 videos, 8 videos, something like that. And I just wasn't seeing much growth. Now it'd only been like 3 or 4 weeks, but I wasn't seeing growth. I was like, oh, let's try something else. So I made an online course, and nobody bought it. So I made another online course, different online course. Nobody bought it. And so I stepped back, and it's like, okay, none of these things are working. And looking back, it's like, well, I didn't give it anywhere near enough time for it to work. And maybe I think any one of those things could have been successful had I really focused and put the time in and put the work in and put the quantity that turns into quality into it. But anyway, that wasn't the case back then. And so I took a step back, and I was like, well, what if I did a podcast? Because I'd gotten into board games and the gaming industry and game design, and for a long time it had been a hobby, but I wanted to do it more kind of professionally, see if I could get some games published and show up in store shelves, maybe make a little bit of money off of it. But I was in Honduras, and not exactly a booming epicenter of the gaming hobby. There's no game stores in Honduras really. Maybe 1, maybe 2. I'd never found them, but maybe they're there. And I didn't have good internet, and there's just a lot of obstacles. But I thought, well, what if I start a podcast? And what if I start interviewing other designers? Because I'm not particularly good at design. Back in 2016, I was just kind of figuring things out and getting started. But what if I interview other people who are really good, and then I just invite all these different guests on the show. And so I started kind of coming up with ideas and planning the podcast that I wish existed. There were several game design podcasts out there, but none of them were really scratching the itch that I needed. And so I was like, let me just create the thing that I want. And I upped my internet to decent enough and started figuring out, okay, how do I do this whole podcasting thing, and just learning online and doing different online courses and getting different resources. And I bought a $40 microphone, and a friend of mine brought it down, shipped it to his house through Amazon, and he was coming down on a trip and he brought it to me and just started figuring things out. And then I started reaching out to really popular, really famous people in the board game space, and I had no thought that they were going to say yes. I didn't expect anyone to even reply back to me, but I kind of created a list of 10 people. It's like, all right, if I could get these 10 to start the show, then that would be really, really cool. If they're way out of my league, I'm jumping into the deep end of the pool, I have no business being here, they have no business saying yes or even replying, but let's just see what happens. Let's shoot the shot. Let's show up. Like Greg did, and so just see what code I can crack in the background. And to my surprise, 8 out of the 10 not only responded, but they said yes. They said, yeah, sure, I'll join you on your unknown podcast. And all of a sudden, it got real. And it's like, oh shoot, this is not only unexpected, but now this is overwhelming and surprising, and I'm a little nervous and anxiety, creeping in. And it's like, and so we started setting up days and times and schedules and all these things, and just started recording this podcast. And initially, my thought was, okay, this is kind of cool. What does success look like? It was like, okay, what if I could just get like 100 listeners, like 100 regular listeners, build up a little community? And I thought, triple digits. If I could hit triple digits of listeners and downloads per episode, that'd be really, really cool. But I didn't have any thought that this was going to turn into some business venture, that this is going to be anything bigger than just, I'm passionate about this. This is a cool way to get a little bit deeper into game design. I mean, think about it, a game design podcast, that's not just a niche. It's like a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. I mean, there's not a lot of people in the world, thinking about it now, looking back, it's like, but it was something I was interested in. It was something I was excited about, something I had a passion for. And all those other things, I was passionate to a certain degree about the books I wrote and the courses I made and videos I recorded, things like that. But a lot of it was just chasing results. It wasn't actually chasing the process. And so with this podcast, I started focusing on the process and learning and getting better and doing it long term. And my thought was, let me do 10 episodes. Because I had read somewhere that if you got past 8, if you did episode 9, that puts you in the top 1% of all podcasters. That 99% of podcasts don't make it past 8 episodes. So I was like, let me do 10. Let me do 2 more, and let me get somewhere in that top 1%, and that'd be kind of cool. But what I didn't realize at the time was that in doing that, I was building the habits. I was building a system that I was going to carry out throughout the entirety of the rest of the show, because I was building in the process. And so anyway, I started recording episodes, and looking back, I was kind of smart that when the very first episode, I invited, out of the list of people who said yes, I made the one that was just, there's a guy named Jamie Stegmeyer, who's a good friend of mine now, and I will always be grateful to him. I will always owe him one, because he was the first guest on my show, and again, because of his popularity, because of his reach, then that episode has done really, really well. The show in general has been downloaded over 2 million times over the last 7 years, which boggles my mind. Like, for a show that I was like, I can just get 100 downloads, for it to be downloaded over 2 million is crazy to me. And I know there's plenty of podcasts out there that get 2 million downloads per episode, so I'm not like, oh, look at me and bragging. I'm just want you to understand, like, this is crazy to me still to this day, looking back. And that first episode alone has been downloaded 25,000 times or so. And I never thought, oh, that's going to become a business. Oh, that's going to springboard me into doing a whole bunch of other things. Oh, I'm eventually going to record 300 plus episodes of the show. None of that was on my mind at the beginning. I wasn't chasing results. I was just enjoying the process. And once I got started, once I got going, then I realized this is fun. This is enjoyable. And I picked up momentum, and it picked up momentum, and it picked up momentum, and then it grew, and the audience grew, and the community grew, and now it's the biggest Facebook community of board game designers on the internet. And it's just so many things that I never anticipated, but it's because one, I stopped chasing results, I chased the process. Two, I lowered the bar and it's just like, hey, let's just get a $40 microphone. Let's just try a podcast and just see what happens. Let's send out some emails. Anybody can do that. There's no reason why I can't. Even with terrible internet, even living in a third world country, like, let's just figure this thing out and go for it. And so if I can do it, I promise you can do it. Just lower the bar and just go from there. And I redefined success. It wasn't about, hey, let me become rich and famous. Let me become popular. Even looking back, it's like 100 downloads. Like, that's such a tiny, a tiny little idea about what success is, especially for a podcast. I just started doing those things and I was able to get off the couch. And then the more I got off the couch, the more I wanted to get off the couch. And again, it picked up momentum and it just kept going. And it's not magic. It's just about creating systems. It's about figuring out what you enjoy. It's about figuring out what gets you going and then leaning into it over and over and over again, even when it's hard, even when things don't turn out, even when people tell you that you're not any good at it, even when people tell you that you're great at it and you don't believe them, the imposter syndrome, things like that. You just let all of that other stuff go and you just do the thing. You just start. Whatever it looks like, wherever you are, with whatever you have, like, you just get moving. And then you screw up, you fail, and then you wake up the next day and you just do it again. You just try to take one more step. That's the thing. You're not trying to take these big giant leaps on a daily basis or weekly. You're just trying to get up on a daily basis and take one more step than you took the day before. And some days those steps are tiny. Some days you're barely like moving an inch. Like you're barely going anywhere at all, but you made progress because you're an inch further today than you were yesterday. And some days you'll go a foot, some days you'll go a yard, some days you'll go a daggum mile. But it doesn't matter. As long as you're moving forward, you just keep going. And so hopefully you found something helpful in there, some advice in there that'll just get you started, get you going. It's not magic, it's not rocket science. It's just do it. You can. If I can do it, you can do it. I promise. So good luck out there, and I'll see you in the next one.